Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and with me in the Rabbit Hole studio today, he is the director of the new documentary, Don't Be Nice. We reviewed it on the website, Mr. Max Powers. Welcome, Max.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate anybody who schleps to Brooklyn to be on the show. But I saw the film, and I definitely want to talk about it. But I want to talk to you about you first, kind of give people a little bit of background on you. How did you get into filmmaking, and like what is your origin story, so to speak?
I got into filmmaking actually in high school. I had like a video audio tech teacher who was really awesome, and I taught myself editing. Then went to Vassar College out in Poughkeepsie. They have a really good film program there. Studied film there, and then actually started doing boom operating for indie narrative films. And so I kind of cut my chops on sets doing that boom operating. It's a pretty grueling schedule and a pretty intense task. And then I learned from the mixer how to sound mix. So actually right out of college, I was doing sound mixing, kind of one-man band sound mixing for low-budget narrative feature films, like 20, 30-person crew. And so I did that for a while, but the editing part of me that really liked the editing kind of kept nagging me along, and so I took an assistant editing job at a company called Flatbush Pictures. And just got thrown right into a movie that was halfway through an edit, and just started learning from there, and met two amazing editors who kind of mentored me. I worked on them with a number of films.
Don't Be Nice, is this your first feature that you've directed?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you direct anything? Did you do shorts or anything like that before?
Yeah, so like in college, I was a film major, did a lot of short narrative projects, and just kind of 5-10 minute shorts like you do in any film school film program. Hadn't really done much documentary, but I had done editing, assistant editing, and some editing for documentaries. And also what was awesome about doing sound is that the company that I was doing assistant editing for said, hey, why don't we have you do the sound on one of their feature documentaries. I had never done sound on docs, which is actually even harder than sound on a narrative because you don't get a take and then a break. You're often filming for 3-4 hours at a time. But what that allowed me to do was I was there for every interview. I was there for every moment of filming. And so I kind of got to observe the guy who I'm actually working for right now, the owner of Flatbush Pictures, a guy named Judd Ehrlich, an amazing director. Got to observe him, how he did everything and how he conducted an interview. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I wasn't doing sound.
That was kind of your documentary film school kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
And for Don't Be Nice, so we're going to talk about the film. I kind of wanted, for those who haven't seen it or read the review, what is the film about? Like, kind of set it up for us. Give me the log line, like the Hollywood log line of Don't Be Nice.
Okay, so the Hollywood log line, I guess, would be a group of 5 New York City slam poets get together for a summer with 2 coaches to write poetry and train for the National Poetry Slam, which is a national poetry competition.
And that's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
These are kids from New York. This is the Bowery Poetry Club. So how did this kind of happen? Who said, you know what, that's a story, we should be following that? Like, how did that come about?
It was a combination of things. Our producer, Nikhil Melnichuk, at the time was running the Bowery Poetry Club. I actually knew him from childhood. He lived a street over from me back in Massachusetts. And we had made some shorts together. I had edited some shorts for him. So he was running the Bowery Poetry Club, and he had hooked up with this foundation called the Radio Drama Network, which had given some funding. The Bowery Arts and Science is a nonprofit, so they had gotten some funding to do a slam program and to start filming some. And so he called me up. He was like, "Do you want to come by the club?" I had never really, I mean, in college I had seen like a few slam poems, but I had never been to a poetry club. So I was like, yeah,
You weren't
sure.
a slam aficionado.
I was completely not a slam aficionado. So I came into the club, was blown away by the poetry, by the scene there, and Nikhil was kind of like, so we're going to start filming the slams because we're having this competition. We're having this competition anyway to select a team that Bowery's going to send to the Nationals. So that competition to select that team happens in the movie. It's the first scene, but in reality, that competition takes place every Monday for about 3 to 4 months to work down and select the team.
So they're going through the poets and seeing performances. They're getting scored, and then they're kind of selecting the best of. They want like the best 5 or 6 or whatever.
Yeah, so it's the best 5, and so there's all these. So there's weekly competitions that then are the weekly competitions that then are into semifinals and finals. So there's a whole kind of bracketing system that goes on at poetry clubs across New York and across the country. It's very similar to select a team.
Then this team is gathered, and then they're going to go to the nationals down in Atlanta. But when did it like become a documentary? In terms of like, when was it like, oh, you know what, these guys are a story that we're going to follow them? It's because it's akin to like a sports movie.
Yeah, totally.
You know, it's like your favorite basketball team that goes to nationals from a college or whatever. It's very similar in format because you follow these guys all summer long until they get to the August slam. So it almost has like a sports kind of structure to it. But when was that? When did somebody say, you know what, that's the movie kind of thing?
Right. And it's funny you bring up sports because my background of editing-wise was editing sports films. We knew that there was going to be kind of a built-in sports-like structure to the summer. I saw the poems and how powerful they were and how the poets would just pour themselves out on the stage. I knew that the stories behind those poems were going to be, really moving and incredible. And so we didn't actually know who was on the team when we made the decision that this was definitely we were going to go forward and do this. And so Nikhil and I kind of said, I think, this could be a great movie. And what appealed to me especially was I knew we were going to have a really strong group of poets who know how to perform and know how to write really compelling material. And also we had, in my mind, one of the hard things with documentaries is finding a structure that works and finding a way to end it or kind of figure out what the beast is. And so I said, hey, there's already this built-in structure with a competition at the end, and I can really, lean on what a lot of competition documentaries do, which is lean on this timeline.
Right. And then you also know that, like, win or lose, you have an ending.
Yeah.
Which... for those of you out there who haven't done documentary, that's some of the hardest stuff in it, is trying to find, first of all, it's like, what's the story? When I had Lindsay Van Dyke here, she works for Vice, and they do these documentary news bits all the time, and it's like, she says, like, who's the protagonist in this, and who can we show? Who are the characters? Because you're making a story structure, but you're doing it with real people.
Right.
In this one, you had your protagonist, you had your structure, you know how it's going to be. You don't know if they're going to win or lose, but that's just great. That's suspense. That's drama that you can put at the end. But at least you have a path of somewhere you got to go. You're not just like shooting these people ad nauseum for like 2 years or something like that. Doing this, you guys hung with these guys for a few months. Talk about some of the challenges that you faced, and in sort of like, how many days are you shooting a week, and how many like crew members do you have? Is it just you and the DP? Do you have like 5-20 people with you? Like, how are you guys putting this stuff together?
So we were we were working for a nonprofit, the Radio Drama Network, which is amazing, who funded the film, was super generous, but still we knew that this was going to be a fly-on-the-wall kind of verite style film, which means you have to film a lot. We wanted to keep the crew small, because when you keep the crew small, people are just more comfortable. And also, you can't, if you're going to be shooting every other day or every 3 days, the costs start to really rise once you get 6-7 people
Right,
on set.
especially when you're doing it for months on end.
Right. And so what we decided to do, it was mainly Cora Atkinson, who was another producer who got brought in early on. Cora Atkinson, the director of photography, Peter Buntain, who's amazing, and me. And I did the sound on the whole thing because I had the sound experience, and I was like, hey, this is a great way that we can save $350 a day. And so I ended up doing the sound on everything, and it kept the crew really, really small. So basically the team was selected, and then the poets were writing poetry and kind of training, for lack of a better word, throughout the summer. They would meet pretty much at least twice a week for the first couple months, and then the last month things get more intense, and they're meeting almost every day. We filmed, I think at the end, there were the rehearsals and writing sessions were anywhere from 3 hours to 6 hours long sometimes, and we filmed about 27 of those.
So how many hours are you talking about here?
So we're talking about definitely over 200 hours, not
Wow.
including the multicam kind of competition footage, which that really adds up once you get 3 or 4 cameras, which is what we're doing at the end with those competitions.
It's a lot. It's a lot in the editing room to take on. Like
Yeah.
I've edited documentary before, and usually the hardest part is like just going through everything and trying to like sift for the gold in all the stones, trying to get the good nuggets kind of thing. Well, the first challenge is like, well, you got a bunch of people writing poetry together. Like, how do you dramatize that? How do you make that exciting?
Yeah.
Because if somebody was like, what's the pitch for this movie? Oh, it's 6 kids writing poetry in a room for 200 hours. We're going to make a movie out of it.
And that's what my editor kind of originally said, when David Lieberman, who was the first editor who was brought in, and I kind of explained the project, he was like, so did you go home with them like a lot? Like, what's the really interesting backstories? I was like, no, not much of that. And so he was like, so it's basically like people in rooms talking about poems. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of that.
Coming this summer to a theater near you.
Exactly. And we didn't...
Right up against Avengers 5.
Yeah, seriously. So we didn't even know if... we didn't know if that was actually a viable kind of film. I found it really interesting. He found it really interesting to kind of track the development of poems almost rather than tracking the development of subjects or characters. Like if when you watch the film, we actually structured it in some ways more along the development of a poem than we did the development and growth of an individual subject. And our first kind of, Nikhil, our producer, forced us to do a lot of early screenings, which ended up being a good thing, although at the time...
I heard there was like 10 of them that you guys did, which is crazy.
Which is insane, and obviously to, show stuff, especially as an editor, to show stuff to a large crowd before you think it's ready is very painful.
Yeah.
But our first one showed us that people were responding to a movie that was about writing poetry and the process. And we didn't know if that was going to be as interesting to people as it was to us.
Yeah, I mean, and you kind of never know until you get it in front of people who aren't you. Like, until you show this movie to strangers, it's really hard to tell. the movie is not just that, which is great. There is a part where you take one of the poems on the road and you shoot the sequence in the subway.
Yeah.
With August.
Ashley August.
Ashley
yeah.
August, yeah, who I thought was one of the standouts of the picture, and you do follow her a little bit. You have this great. She takes one of her poems, and you kind of like. It's sort of a cinematic depiction of it, which I thought was great, and it really kind of comes at the right part of the movie as well, because you can start to lose people in development of tracking the writing of poems, and then you just kind of take one and say like this is what this can be cinematically,
Right.
which I thought was a lot of fun. Was that your idea to do that, or
So that was
how did
actually
that come about?
yeah. So the cool thing about that is that was actually David Lieberman, who was one of the editors on the project and was actually my mentor for editing me. That was a lot of his idea, because he had been really looking and he had been reading about and loves musicals. And so in musicals, you have a musical number that kind of comes out of the story, the fourth wall is kind of broken, and a character, underscores how they're feeling or what's happening in the story with a musical number. And so 6 months into editing, we were, honing the story, really figuring out kind of what the movie was. But then we were like, man, we really just need to amp things up a bit at some times in the film. And so David kind of was like, you know what, for the Ashley's Octopus poem, it's about the subway. It's about octopuses, or octopi. And so he, being native New Yorker, knew about the Natural History Museum stop and the these different subway stops. And so we kind of just got going on that. And we ended up doing that with these kind of treatments with 3 different poems throughout the movie. And so I think it was a combination of, it was just a really cool, fun idea that showed you the power of the poem, but was also born out of a necessity sometimes to get some, besides the competitions in the film, we really wanted to amp up the energy and really get in your face, which is what it feels like to be at a slam.
The film is entertaining. I think the downfall of a lot of documentaries, or what used to be documentaries, is like, oh, we're going to watch a bunch of talking heads and it's going to be eat this because it's good for you. It's like a eat your vegetables kind of movie.
Yeah.
And when you start to hear stuff about poetry, like, oh, God, this is going to be, but then this is really entertaining stuff. Like the poems themselves or the performances of I don't, probably not so much on the page, but the performances are entertaining, and they're performed by people who know how to do it. Whereas, you and I look like a schmuck trying to read this stuff, but these people really bring it to life. And that, I felt like, okay, they're showing you what this can do. They're kind of taking it out on the road, so to speak, and show you it's not just for recital, it's not just for a stage, but it's kind of a living, breathing thing, which is a lot more fun than sitting it and watching it in a clinical rehearsal room setting, or like in just on a stage. With this particular picture, in the development of these, you said you track the poems, but within the development of the poem and what they're writing, you also get these personal touchstones and these personal milestones that these people are going through.
Yeah.
And, the thing that I wanted to kind of talk about for anybody who's looking to do a doc out there is, how do you sort of negotiate these emotional moments with people and not exploit them? Not feel like we're watching a car wreck, or how do you get it so that you were in the, because I said in the review, it's like you feel like you're in the room with them, and you're kind of taking place, and you get to be emotional with them as well, because the movie, it makes you laugh, it makes you cry, you go on this emotional roller coaster with these kids, but how do you do that without it seeming exploitative or like a cheap reality show?
I think that there are a lot of moments in the film that are, some of the subjects get really emotional.
I mean, you literally have people recounting trauma in this movie.
Yeah. And so I think that there's 2 parts of it. One of it is in the filming of it, which is you want to, I think every documentary kind of it's a good ground rule to have that if someone ever asks you to stop filming, then you stop filming. And that only happened like once or twice. And also that you just kind of have to navigate how hard you're pushing people, which in this case, actually, or all of the times on screen that there's a lot of emotion, it's not the producers like kind of pushing it. It's often, in many cases, it's the coach, or it's just the emotional nature of the poem itself. But then there's, how do you kind of treat that material when you're sculpting the narrative in the edit?
Once you've got it, now you have to be the arbiter of, okay, so how much of this do I show?
Right.
How do I show all the tears? Do I imply the tears? Do I cut to somebody else while this guy is crying while he's trying to do this thing? Like, and that little thing, I think, makes all the difference between, oh my God, I don't want to watch this because I feel like I'm watching somebody go recount trauma or something,
Right.
and I'm in this moment with this person, and I'm sure, did you guys like labor over that for?
Totally. And I think it's kind of a weird term to use, but you tend to use this term sometimes as like, did you earn it? So that's kind of the term, which is a weird term to use, and but you do use it in the edit room a lot, because a lot of times that line of, does this feel like too much, is often that it doesn't feel earned, in the sense that you're seeing an incredible amount of emotion, but you don't quite understand why that emotion's taking place, and you're not really with that subject or that character. I think that when you're sitting and you're watching a film and someone's having an incredible emotional reaction, and you're with them, it doesn't feel exploitative, and it doesn't have that characteristic. And so it's not about, I think, how much or little you show. It's about the work that you did leading up to that moment to get the audience in the place where they understand that is and can empathize with that emotion.
Yeah, it's like feeling with them and not at them,
right?
In a way, and that it's a fine line. But yeah, earning those moments, so that, because otherwise it just feels really manipulative. You know, and you don't want to be that. I mean, all movies manipulate.
Totally.
That's what you're doing. You're manipulating the audience. That's what we do, kids. But you don't want the audience to feel like they're manipulated. So, if they feel like if you feel like somebody's grabbing you by the back of the neck and forcing you to watch this thing, then you're doing it wrong. Like, they should be there. And also I felt like some of the cinematography helped that too. Because you guys were right there in the room with these people, and you were like, it felt like you were just another poet in the room, or another observer, fly on the wall kind of thing. It didn't feel like, oh, we're staging this emotional moment for you, or you've pushed these people into doing this. It seemed like it got there rather organically. I could be completely wrong.
No, you're right, and I think that that was in large part just due to the amount of time we spent filming. I mean, most of the moments where some subjects get really emotional, those weren't after 2 weeks of filming. Those were after 2 months of filming. Those were after, we've been on the road with the team, and in some ways we're all kind of feel like we're on the same poetry team together.
Right, and they're used to you, and they're comfortable with you, and they're okay to be themselves around you, and you can ask a lot of questions like, would this still happen if there weren't cameras there? Because these people are performers, so they're performing for the camera in a way. It's a bit of a flirtation, I think, that goes on between you and your subject, but I think it's just a matter of like getting out of the way enough,
right,
and letting stuff happen.
And that's what we did, and so that's why I think also the moments feel real, because they're not in an interview where I am pressing them over and over again to try and talk about something that they don't want to talk about, and then end up breaking down and crying or something like that. It's definitely the fact that everyone feels comfortable enough to be able to have true emotion, because we've been filming and the camera's been here for 2 months, and so it kind of at this point everyone's very comfortable.
Right, and you're earning those moments,
Yeah.
with them. I got to wrap up, but for anybody who hasn't seen the film or wants to see the film, where can they find out more about you? Where can they find out about the movie on the web?
If you want to check out the website, it's at don'tbenicemovie.com. It's also Don't Be Nice on Facebook.
Fantastic. It's really good. I highly recommend it. You can see our review, norestoftheweekendpodcast.com. I wrote a review there. You can check that out if you want to know more about the movie. I'm going to wrap up, but thanks so much for coming. And thank you all out there for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more episodes of this show, you can always find them on the website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. You can also subscribe here on all your favorite podcast apps. And now we have a channel on Footprint TV. So if you go to footprint.tv or download the app, you can find this and other Behind the Rabbit Productions material there. And also, we're on Patreon if you want to follow us there, patreon.com/NoRestOfTheWeekend. Once again, just a quick thanks to Max Powers. Thanks so much for coming, man. It's been really informative, and I love the movie. Congratulations on a great film. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.